Thank you, and thank you for the conference organizers' the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure. It's just funny because I've not been in regulation since probably 1988, which I'm dating myself when I was a general counsel. But I was appreciative of the assignment. I thought it was a little strange. Why me? But as I looked at it, gave us a great opportunity to review actually what is happening at the federal, state, and regional levels around storage regulation and what the various agencies are doing to promote storage. So I appreciate the homework assignment because I learned a lot in the process. And I could tell you in just going through this, we have a country that's extremely bullish on storage. And at almost every level, I'm finding an awful lot of activity that's promoting the use of storage as a vehicle on the grid. So what I thought we would do today is I would go through, and I'm happy to take any questions of what is happening, and how this works. And it was interesting because when I was first looking at it, the question was what's going on in terms of cap and trade and the relationship of cap and trade to storage. And what's fascinating is we don't need cap and trade when we're in the storage industry. We actually have the regulatory process in place right now. All we need to do now as an industry is start taking advantage of it. So if I kind of go through it then, the first piece is, when you think about the kingmakers of our legislative policy and energy policy in the state, it comes out of the Senate and the House. This actually happens coming out of the Senate energy bill that Zibelman is having and is proposing. And it basically is looking at the policy goal of adding storage to the grid. And if you're not familiar with Alicia Jackson, she is Zibelman's top aide on the energy side of the Energy Conference Committee. And effectively, what the Congress has already recognized is that we're not going to achieve our goal in this country of sustainability, of reducing carbon emissions and freeing ourselves of oil from looking and going towards renewable energy unless we have storage. And so they've got the message. And so part of what Alicia is looking at and what Zibelman's bill is looking at is promoting storage on the bill and allowing a lot more reliability. So there's already a congressional recognition. We're there. So we don't need cap and trade, that's my point. All we need to do is move forward on the energy bill that's already been pending before the House and Senate. The other piece is that they've gone through, and here's actually looking at existing legislation as well as proposed legislation, sort of where we are. So I.mp4 2005, which was under the Bush administration, already identified that a critical piece of our framework going forward is having advanced transmission technology, and already identified storage as a piece of that technology. And so we already have in place a recognition among, at least at the federal level, that we absolutely do need storage to have on the grid. And not only that, it should be recognized as its advanced technology, which means under FERC rules, you get an improved rate of return, you get a return of your construction work in progress, all the various pieces of when you have advanced technology, transmission technology, is beneficial, plus you get embedded when you're part of a grid operator system like we are in California. When it gets approved as part of the planning process, it actually becomes part of the regulated rate. So, and effectively what they're saying in I.mp4 2005, we recognize we need to have a smart grid. We recognize storage is an integral part of the smart grid, and if people are putting storage in lieu of transmission in terms of being able to advance and increase throughput on the system, we'll treat it like a transmission asset, meaning it'll get an improved rate of return, it will be embedded in rate base, so from an investor standpoint, it's just a cash register. And so it's a wonderful opportunity. EISA 2007 is a council that was established to actually look at storage. It's under the DOE and is actually already looking at advanced storage technologies. We're all familiar with this ARRA and the smart grid and the amount of monies that have been put through to improve storage technology. And then the other act which is important is SELA 1462, which is recognizing that we need to start looking at how we shift load on the grid. And that shifting load could be shifting load at the grid level as well as shifting load at the local level, the kind of stuff that Balance Energy does and Veridity Energy does, which is recognizing that as we move to a more renewable type grid, we need to be able to control energy on both ends. And we also need to think about shifting load from the afternoon hours to the evening hours, particularly when you have a lot of wind, because that tends to be the valley of death for wind, where there's a lot of wind on at night, particularly in regions of the country like in the Midwest where there's a lot of nuclear and a lot of wind and no load at night. And so storage technologies are also seen as a huge panacea, not only for managing stability of the grid, but managing the circumstances we have in certain portions of the country where in the middle of the night we've got the wind blowing, we've got the nuclear plants going, and nobody's using electricity, so we need to start shifting to that. So it's, so the point is, good story is that we don't need to persuade Congress. Congress is there. We just need to start acting on it.
Does that include provision for using car batteries as a storage, or is this more on a full, utility scale grid kind of thing?
No, it's both, particularly Excella. Now, there are particular provisions that are, and I'm sure the next speaker will talk about it, related to electric vehicles. But my point is, this is the full span. And FERC itself, now if it's grid-based technology, it gets transmission treatment. But certainly what Congress has recognized is that behind-the-meter technology or distributed-based technologies also are hugely valuable on helping manage an efficient grid.
Well, I mean, in terms of, let's say, paying for itself, if somebody has a battery in their car and they're able to use that kind of thing, they're getting disparate treatment in a sense because they're not serving the grid in a direct regulated sense. Oh,
they are, yes, and actually they are. And if we could, when we go towards the technology, that's sort of the end piece, is in the markets, they're providing a hugely valuable asset to the market.
But are they getting paid for it, is my question, I guess.
They are in certain areas, not in certain other areas, and FERC is working on that right now. So here's Storage Act 1091, which is one of the pending acts, and this is certain incentives that folks are looking at. This is a 20% business tax incentives of large energy storage systems, 30% for energy storage systems located at consumer sites, and 30% for residential. So yet again, and this is all pending. As you guys know, everyone might know, there's a fight right now between Bingaman bill and the Curry bill about which one's going to get out there. The Curry bill has the cap and trade. Bingaman's saying, forget cap and trade, let's just get an energy bill passed. And so, for those of us in the industry, what I would suggest is we advocate for getting these done. Because we get these done, so two things will happen. One, it doesn't have a cap and trade, so it doesn't have all the emotion around that. Secondly, we get this done. And once we have a cap and trade, now we have the equipment in place that allows us to deal with having a cap and trade and switching to a non-carbon intense fuel mix. So it's, but clearly, the efforts are there. This is also the perspective that Congress does of where it goes. So to your question, they're looking at this at the full gamut. They're not limiting themselves to grid-based. They're looking at all sorts of storage and recognize the value. So let me go, then the next one is then switching to FERC. And what is FERC doing? So, at that level, there are three pieces really, that I would say. One is, FERC issued a rulemaking last year. It was the West, can't remember the name of the case, even though it was my husband's case. But it was a grid-based case of battery storage on the grid. And this was the first case that came out of EPACT. And what they did is they wanted to put 3 batteries. They identified in the California ISO's transmission plan an opportunity to substitute batteries for building new transmission, and as a way that was much cheaper, obviously a lower environmental impact than the batteries themselves. And they were able to get FERC recognition that if they install that system, that the batteries would be treated as a transmission asset. As a result, it would get incentive rates, it would get construction work in progress, development costs baked into rates, and it would be entitled to a guaranteed rate of return as part of the California transmission plan. With that in place, then of course from the standpoint of an investor, you've now got a pre-improved transmission asset, which you can now then invest in with a great guarantee. You don't have to have a power purchase agreement. It gets embedded in the system. Yes?
Could you speak a little bit to the risk that we run of solving these sort of non-transmission solutions instead of looking at the larger long-term picture? In other words, this is a great Band-Aid, but the question is this really a long-term solution in the absence of transmission? Can you talk a little bit about that? In other words, if you can substitute transmission lines with batteries, that might work for some small increment of improvement. But in order to really get done the level of renewables that are required, can you really do it with batteries, or don't you need transmission?
Well, I don't think of anything as an either-or. I think the problem is, and this is where I was going to go to, the problem is with our regional transmission planning processes, which is something else that FERC is looking at. I'm going to move away from the light in my eyes. Is now very much focused, has been traditionally focused on looking at a program that you look at forecasted demand, and then you look at forecasted generation and forecasted generation retirements to determine what level of transmission you want. So it's a very traditionally based program. What FERC did and what EPACT has done is say, wait a minute, we ought not just be looking at traditional upgrades of existing systems or new wires in the air. We need to also start looking at advanced technologies that allow us to increase the throughput. So there's 2 points of building a transmission system. One is building a robust transmission system, in which case you do need new transmission assets. The other is creating a flexible and very smart transmission system, which is where batteries come in. So if you have a congestion point on the grid, and it would take you 2 or 3 years to build out transmission because of the difficulty of siting, and you could do that achieve the same objective in 6 months by putting in a battery, why not? We can't afford as a society to, when we have these huge electric prices, to pay, particularly in systems like ours where we pay marginal prices at locations, to not identify the congestion points on the system and reduce that congestion by storage. And when you have large amounts of wind and renewables, you use storage as a basis to help smooth those out. So I'm not for one saying you can do one and not the other. You need to do both, but to do one and ignore the other, whether you're ignoring the ability of storage to meet your needs or the need for new transmission, we're going to be making a mistake.
To what extent do you think permitting